How did you come to the work that you do? Obviously, there's like a direct link, as you said, between your own experiences, but did you start out like knowing that that's the work that you wanted to do? Or like, what was your journey
No.
like? I'm very curious about that, if you don't mind sharing.
Not at all. Not at all. If I might share a little bit, being from Alabama, my childhood heroes were the Tuskegee Airmen. And I grew up wanting to be a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. And it's interesting because I even as I look on my wall, I have a painting of the 332nd Fighter Group from the Tuskegee Airmen on my wall because it was inspiration for even how I got here, right? And was well on my way to becoming a pilot, right? My experiences in college, I went in, was going through the ROTC program, was preparing, for all of my qualifying tests and things of that nature. And I got to one qualifying test. It was a medical exam, and they stood me a few feet away from an eye chart, and and I could not see anything for the life of me, right, in a far distance. And at that particular time, you needed 20/20 vision in order to qualify to go on to pilot training with the United States Air Force. So I dropped out because if it wasn't to be a pilot, I didn't want to do it, right? From there, I struggled trying to find my way. Yeah, I took a class in at a PWI in the state of Alabama. This is the same place where I was at ROTC, and it was a history class taught by a white professor. There were two black people in it, myself and a black female, and the other 25 or so students were all white. And we came to a section on affirmative action. And the professor allowed this white female student to share her thoughts on affirmative action. And as she shared, I'll never forget this. She said, yes. And she was looking directly at me as if it were my fault, right? She said, my mom got fired so that a non-qualified black person could take her job. And she's looking at me as she's saying this. And it burned me in a way that I did not have the words to articulate at the time, and definitely did not have the consciousness or the words to fire off a response to her at the time. So I sat there quiet. And my colleague, the black female, she dropped her head and she sat quiet as well. And I looked at the professor and I looked at him and he looked at me like, well, what are you going to say? As if I had to defend affirmative action in an undergraduate history course. He wanted me to defend a policy that was put into place in some places based on what I know was a lie by this other student. And that's when some cynicism started to set in, and that's when I started to read more voraciously, right? And that's when the construct really set with me on a daily basis. From that point forward, I was aware and conscious of it all the time, everywhere I moved, because I knew it wasn't right. I just didn't know how to address it or where to address it. All right. So what happened was and I'm sorry for the being long-winded. What happened was I floundered around looking for a major. I think I changed my major like 3 times. I was an engineering major. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to go fly, well, I don't really want to do engineering, right? So I changed my major like twice and was struggling. And then money was running low. Of course, when I left ROTC, my scholarship left as well. So I went and enlisted in the United States Air Force. After I ran across a buddy who was driving this really nice car and he had his school paid for. I was like, man, how are you doing this? You're from this small town right up the road. He's like, I'm in the reserves and they'll do X, Y, and Z. So I went and signed up. But instead of signing up for the reserves, I went active duty, and it was one of the best decisions that I ever made because it allowed me the opportunity to refocus myself. It allowed me the opportunity to travel not only this country, but the world. And then it allowed me the opportunity to engage in work that eventually led me to here. to what I do currently today. It was a happen chance volunteer experience where I volunteered to work with some kids in the local community where I was stationed. And I absolutely enjoyed it. And so after working with them, still connected with some friends who were currently in the career field that I'm currently in, I said, well, that's what I need to do so that I can go work with kids in that way. And so that's what led me there. From there, the rest is history. I, of course, got to my first K through 12 school, had a mentor who said, you're different, dude. You need to go get your doc or something. And so there I went. And of course, once you start doctoral work, you immerse yourself in research. And of course, my mind is really primed for that type of work. And hence here I am. And those life experiences, starting from first grade on to third grade, those other high school experiences, being an athlete and a scholar, that experience at that PWI in that history class with that white female and that white professor, all of those things stayed with me as I chose my dissertation topic. And as I thought about the work that I'd done with kids who were in circumstances, not because their parents didn't work hard, not because they were somehow slackers or things of that nature, but because of the historical trek of this country that directly led to those disparities. I was like, this shit ain't right, and excuse my French. And so therefore, I'm going to do what I can do in the lane that I've been placed in to help kids just like that to move out of those circumstances with the gifts that they've been given. And so here I am, and that's why I'm doing research on the school to prison pipeline. It is why I understand the disparities in discipline in the K through 12 environment. And we have to look at that honestly, because 80% of teachers are white women. And one of the first things I do when I do workshops at schools is I let those teachers know you can't effectively teach students that you're inherently afraid of because of the color of their skin or because of your perceptions of who they are because of the color of their skin. And I have those very brash and honest conversations unapologetically, because it's going to take unapologetic work in order to get this ship on the course that it should be on and that it should have been on from the day that this country was founded. So when you talk about the doll studies that were done by the Clarks that sort of pulled just a little bit of the covers off of the insidiousness of racism and the negative impact that it can have, it only scratched the surface. And a lot of our, non-Black brothers and sisters, although there are some others who are from other racial, quote unquote, categories in the United States who do get it to a degree, many don't get it at all. Like you said, the depravity and what it can do to a person psychologically, emotionally, and of course, if a person is impacted psychologically and emotionally, they can be impacted physically and in other ways as well. They have no clue. There is a reason why there are so many disparities amongst the Black community compared to white community in things like healthcare. Yes, we do like our soul food, but I'm from the South, and white folks eat just as much soul food as we do, and we still die sooner. It is because sometimes carrying that psychological burden that racism can have on a person manifests in very physical ways through stress, anxiety, heart disease, diabetes, and all of those things that can impact in very real ways. And so we can sit here all night and discuss those cross connections and how the majority, I think it's the majority of the country, don't get it nor its negative impact. Yeah.
I fully agree with that. Like the majority of the country clearly does not get it. That's part of my inspiration for this live stream, and for the meetup group that I started. The first thing I did when I moved back from New York, when I was done after my 12-year stint in New York City. I came back to North Carolina. One of the first things I did was start a meetup group to have conversations about race. And, we had people from all walks of life, all political persuasions, all, gender identities, sexualities, everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and the conversations were always amazing, and people were always come away reflecting that they learned things, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the stage that I feel like we're at, right? The battleground, I feel like, is education right now. And you can see
Oh,
that
it is.
reflected, like in the state laws that have been passed that are trying to chill education on the subject of race. So obviously you agree.
Oh, absolutely. Education is battleground one, and it is why you're seeing such a huge focus on it from individuals who want to um, turn the hands of time back as it relates to racial progress in this country. It is why you have the groups like the moms groups and the individuals down in Florida who are crafting laws that are regressive in nature, as well as in other states where you see this wanting to not talk about certain aspects of US history because it might make white students uncomfortable. Notice how the centering is on the history that makes white students uncomfortable, as if white students are the only students. So you're absolutely right. It is why education. It is why I am on the front lines fighting this battle uh, with education, and and I welcome any and all to come along with it. First, by getting informed. I'm still informing myself. I do not know it all. I am still learning. And I encourage and try to share with others certain things along those lines as well, so that they can get involved and to fight this fight with me, because it benefits not only Black folks, but it benefits all citizens of the United States when we're able to dialogue like this to bring about more understanding. Yeah, yeah.
Very well said. Very well said. I want to give our audience a little bit of insight here to some of the stuff that we're talking about there. I have up here North Carolina House Bill 324. This is called an act to demonstrate the General Assembly's intent that students, teachers, administrators, and other school employees recognize the equality and rights of all persons, and to prohibit public school units from promoting certain concepts that are contrary to that intent. And it goes on. That one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. That an individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race or sex. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. An individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. That one's the most transparent one that shows that they're only talking
Yeah,
about racialized white students, but
yeah.
it goes on and on. That a meritocracy is inherently racist or sexist. That any individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or other form of psychological distress. Literally trying to legislate whether whether we talk about people's feelings as it relates to race.
Right.
That the United States, they threw in this one, that the United States government should be violently overthrown. Curious how that's in with all those different race based education subjects. I just got to put that out
Yes.
there. But yeah, I mean, that the rule of law does not exist, but instead is a series of power relationships and struggles among racial and other groups. I mean, it's just, it is a shining
It is
beacon to white
insidious.
supremacy, I would say.
Yes. It is insidious. And these people are well aware of what they are doing, and they're only using modern language to try to cloak their intent that they were once overtly able to do. That's where we are. which is why it's up to us to talk even more and to engage even more so. Yeah.
Agree. And
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you in terms of the covertness, but I mean, we're getting pretty overt here. I have to say, like, I feel like, um, you know, when I was growing up, I feel like this was pretty much unimaginable for people, a law like this.
Mm.
Like I feel like we've gone quite far from where we were. I already think that the pendulum has swung extremely far. I think that we're just a little bit desensitized a little bit to it somewhat. And you know, think of in such a short time how much death that we've been programmed to accept, that many of
Oh
us
yeah.
have accepted. You know, with COVID, you know, a million people just disappear suddenly.
Just like
And
that.
it's like nothing happened for a lot of people, you know, even people who actually lost people.
Yep.
Um, and, you know, that was very informative to me because I was like, wow, okay, so a million people disappearing is not making y'all blink. So, therefore, what is it going to take? What level of death and destruction do we need to have for enough people to be activated to realize that we need to make significant changes to this society that has quite obviously run its course on the basis of a racial hierarchy that is no longer going to be able to be enforced. We're in the death throes of white supremacy right now, and
Yes.
we need to usher them along their way a little bit more forcefully in my estimation. What do you think?
You know, I used to think that it was our responsibility to usher them towards the exit. And I still think that. I just think it's to a lesser degree. Um, I place the responsibility on those uh, white Americans who do get it to put some skin in the game. And what do I mean by skin in the game? What I mean is that we know that if you speak up and out about the topic of race, that you are inherently going to have to give up something in this society, in this racialized society. It's going to require sacrifice. And I don't believe enough of the good folks who get it have been willing to sacrifice in order to usher these cretins on out of what everyone claims is the greatest country on earth. And we're not even going to get into American exceptionalism uh, and start, well, we might actually, so, and start dissecting those aspects. So the responsibilities, I think it's the responsibility for us to continue to speak up because our inherent survival depends on it. I really do believe that. People say, well, you know, that's rhetoric. Well, no, not when in Mississippi, who's voting tonight, the black maternal mortality rate rivals those countries that are underdeveloped. Not in other parts of the South where the black infant mortality rate is higher, is one of the highest of those developed countries in the world. And those things are intentional because in those very same states, they won't even expand things like Medicaid that could help to reduce those sorts of things. They won't invest in education that can help to reduce those sorts of things. So I'm not being, you know, overly, you know, using lofty rhetoric when I talk about our survival depending on it, but it really does, and that's why. But I think in order for the survival of the country, those folks who get it are going to have to start determining what they're willing to sacrifice and to actually start to sacrifice it. I get it. Power is an addictive thing. Privilege is an addictive thing as well. And once you stick your neck out, especially for the others, people will come for your privilege and they will come for you. And I think we need more people with the courage to stand up and say, you know what, you may come, but I know I'm on the side of what's right, and I do want what's best for the country. And I know that when black folks are doing well, the country is doing well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well
So
said.
that's where I stand on that topic. Uh, with regards to us. I think sometimes it takes me back to that undergraduate course where that professor was looking at me to explain the affirmative action that this other student was highlighting, which I don't have the proof, but I know it was a lie what she was sharing. But the onus is on those who have been historically oppressed to fix their oppression. When in actuality, the onus is on us to only highlight it, and it's up to the oppressor to refrain from their wicked ways, so to speak, if I might go into some biblical type, language and that sort of thing. So what's the carrot? What's the benefit of them doing that? And I honestly believe the benefit of them doing so is being able to live a more authentic life, to be able to live with the integrity that you loudly proclaim as patriots, as Christians, as as loyalists to this country. There is inherent value in being able to live in congruence with the values that you espouse. And right now, many Black folks know that all of those things are typically espoused in contradiction to the actions that those folks are engaged in. So, and
Well,
they hate to be called out on it.
that is so well said. Like that is, I mean,
we're now getting dismissed as, oh, everything's about race. Or here's the more common one: if you even mention the social construct of race now, especially online, you're automatically labeled a Marxist or some crap like that, some crap like that, right? Which is what they're doing now with the all of you mentioned the proposed legislation in North Carolina, the quote unquote anti-CRT legislation. Oh yeah, it's based in Marxism, and that's all of those things are used as a cover to shut down conversations that they don't want to have because they're not ready or unwilling or don't have the courage to feel and experience the uncomfortableness that comes with those conversations. And they don't want their kids to have it either. Yeah. Which is why they're targeting schools.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like they're definitely targeting the youth right now. It's devastating actually, and it's disgusting. And but like the kids are all right. Like they will cast their net and they will drag people in, but ultimately the youth are connected on a level that they've never been connected before, and so are all of us. And so it's much more difficult for them to manipulate people. They're trying to find new ways, like desperately trying to find new ways to manipulate people. But ultimately, I think it's going to be quite difficult for them to rein in what has already been unleashed. Like Pandora's box has been opened, and like we're not moving backwards from here. Like I don't think that that's a reasonable thing to think that will happen. So all that's going to happen is the conflict will intensify over the course of the coming decades. So honestly, it's very not that I'm using you, sir, but like it's not at all. It's very therapeutic for me to hear this conversation. I don't often get to talk to people who are as well versed on this subject as you are, who have experiences that so closely mirror my own, and who have had thoughts that so closely mirror my own. And it is just the difference is just so palpable. It's insane actually. So I'm just like kind of having that experience right now, reflecting on it. I appreciate you. I'm very grateful. So thank you so much.
I get it. We're out here doing the work, and sometimes you wonder, am I the only one? And it's validating, but it's also comforting to know that you're not the only one who's out here doing the work, but also that you're not the only one who's had those experiences. Oftentimes, my dad's generation, they were really socialized. They weren't overtly taught this, but they were socialized to internalize their experiences. And it's only been now that my dad is almost, in his late 70s and 80s that he's starting to talk about some of his experiences growing up in rural Alabama in a segregated South. A lot of it is from pain and hurt, but also a lot of it was they were socialized not to talk about it. And so here we are in our generation, and then with the Gen Alphas that we're raising and the Gen Zs who are out there getting educated right now, they're talking more. And I think that's a good thing. And I appreciate you providing yet another platform by which to do so. It is very much needed. Mhm.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I want to find ways to get the youth more involved, but again, like hopefully in my live events, I don't want a bunch. I don't mind a bunch of old people there, but like I want to talk to the youth. I want to hear what their thoughts are because, both of us know, having worked with young people, right? When they develop ideas, right? Like, if they get the wrong idea, sometimes that can really take hold and just send
Yes.
people down the wrong path. And I just want
Yes.
to catch them, at least give them a chance, give these people a chance to reflect, to learn what reality is, to learn the world they're living in, to learn the country they're living in, to learn, where they fit, in
Yep.
this crazy, crazy
To learn
racial
that they're not
racialized world.
alone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do we do our own research when you get told you're an internet scholar?
Ah, so number one, that's a great question because I've seen those types of exchanges before. And, being a researcher, there's a specific line of things that I engage in to engage in research. But to look again, which what this is what research means, you really don't have to look that far. I would encourage you to start not online, but to start at your local archives and library, and to pull primary documents, to pull the history of your own town first. That is where the research begins. And here's one more: to pull the history of your own family, learning and becoming more aware of who you are, of how your worldview came to be, what were the values that you were taught, what were the beliefs that were inherent in your family circles, what were the assumptions that were made about life in general, about those from within your community and those outside of your community. What are the biases that you hold and how did you learn them either directly or indirectly? That's part of the research that has to be done, starting with self and then starting with your own community. I'm not asking you to go out and read 15 scholarly articles written by, somebody in an ivory tower who you've never heard of. No, even though it's good to do that. I'm telling you to start with self and your own local community at your own local library and archives. And what you will find in many parts of this country is a truth that has been hidden from you in most instances intentionally. I believe that people are inherently good. And once people go out and they find the facts for themselves, they'll be able to process it and they'll make a choice. They'll either choose to acknowledge that truth or they'll choose to remain safe in the racial strata that has been created, in the racial caste system that has been created here in the United States. And that's where that sacrifice and that courage comes into play. What are you going to do after you learn more about yourself, your community? Mm-hmm.
So it's a two
I don't know if
stage.
that
It's
answers the
a
question, but I hope it does.
Oh, I definitely did. And but yeah, it's a two-stage process there. I like the way you put that. It's a two-stage process: knowledge, and then heart. Right? You need the
Yes,
knowledge to make the choice, and then you need the heart to make the right choice. And there is a right choice. I want to say,
there is.
yeah, I want to make that clear because I don't want to like. I don't like to give prescriptions to people, but like in this
Right.
case, I'm at least going to give you my personal opinion, which is that there is a right choice, and the right choice is to step away from the safety of the racial strategy because that safety is illusory. It is not real.
Yes. Yes.
Like racialized white people, my racialized white friends who call me up after having experiences with the police.
Mm.
And they're like, I don't know why this happened, like, but like I thought, like I thought police X, Y, and Z, or like, why would they do this, like, and I'm like, bro, like, we have been telling you about law enforcement for how many decades at this point? Like, how much, like, it can't be a surprise, or like,
Can be.
one of my friends, she's sitting in a coffee shop. Three racialized white men are sitting at a table near her, and she hears their conversation, and they're talking about the most cost efficient way of murdering a black person. Just like any black person. Not like a specific person, like just any black person. and they're just in a coffee shop having that conversation while she's trying to grade papers, and talking about, oh, well, we could use this or we could do that or this, like, and she got incensed, and she yelled at them and she stormed down. She immediately calls me, and and I was just like, this is a person who is featured in my poem Contraband of Race War for being the person who, when I always told her about experiences, racialized experiences that I would have, racial trauma that I went through, she would be the first person saying, I think the quote in the poem is, there's always an alternative explanation. It doesn't always have to lead back to the plantation. Yes. That is her. And here she is calling me, wanting to do what? I was like, what is this call about? Like, what do you want me to say? Like, oh my God, like, I'm so sad for you, or like, I'm so hurt for you, or like, what do you, what is it that you called for? Like, do you want me to explain away what happened there for you? Like, what is it you want, And like, she was so unprepared for that reaction. Like, I don't know what she thought was going to happen, but like, ultimately that conversation, interestingly enough, she did end up acknowledging what she did throughout that time. It took a while, but like, eventually she was like, yes, I did do this. I apologize. Despite our friendship, I did it. I made sure she vocalized that, and she was like, I'm going to do better in the future. And what do you think happened after that? Do you think she did better in the future? She did not, bro. She did not do better. Like,
I was about to say, she probably sought refuge back into the racial caste system that we have.
She made her choice.
A, because it's convenient, B, because it's safe, and C, because it affords privileges that she recognized, whether consciously or not, but chose to prefer versus the uncomfortableness of acknowledging and living the truths that you've been telling her all along, and that she witnessed herself.
Precisely.
Oh, it's just a one-time deal. Those were just a crazy bunch of guys.
No. I don't think she rationalized it away. She made her choice, though. She made her choice exactly based on what you said. And the crazy part about that is that her husband is a black man, and now she has 2 biracial children. And
wow.
And so it's weird because I have knowledge that she made that choice. I don't know what her husband thinks or knows, I have no idea how she deals with, her kids. She has a very light-skinned boy and then a pretty dark-skinned girl, and it's going to be just very interesting to see how it all plays out. That's
when I hear that, I'm interested in the psychological process that goes into managing that level of dissonance, if I might add, like what is at the root of that fear. And I certainly understand that we're socialized from a very early on. Remember, my first experience was in first grade. Right. So first grade, I was what, 7 years old?
I mean, she told me when she was a child and she learned about slavery, she was like, I mean, of course all the white kids were looking at the black kids like, oh, you guys were slaves.
Right.
Like, I was like, what? I like literally never, before she said that to me, I literally never thought about that. I was like, because it's not like I looked at white people and I was like, oh, these are slave masters. I never like did that. I never internalized any of this stuff. So like, I was just like, oh my God, you were thinking that? Like, like what in the world? She's like, yeah, of course. Like, who wouldn't be thinking that? And I was just like, oh God.
That would be us who was not thinking that. We were thinking about, when I get home, I want to play with my G.I. Joes like any other kid.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that, we have these fissures in life experience,
Yes.
And it's interesting because one of the dynamics that white supremacy has created is that as racialized black people, we have to learn more about those life experiences that we don't actually get to have in the race context that white people do get to have. We have to learn about them for our own survival and for our own success and prosperity. Like, if we don't learn about them, it's a huge burden that is insurmountable without that knowledge.
Yes.
And so, like, we, again, for survival purposes, for flourishing purposes, we have that built in incentive to learn that stuff. And we do, in fact, learn that stuff. But on the other end, racialized white people, they don't have that same incentive. In fact, the
You don't
incentives
have
all
to.
point in the other way, that they should ignore, that they should make remain ignorant, remain willfully ignorant if necessary, of black people's life experiences under a white supremacist framework. And so, you know, that is a dynamic that I think is one of the biggest obstacles to the work that I'm doing, is because those incentives are, I mean, they're extreme, in their power.
Yeah.
And so,
It's
I just got to catch people off guard, like, which is what I normally do in the
you
wild,
literally do.
So,
Yeah, you literally do, and it speaks to this notion of the construct of whiteness. And people think that when I use that term, I'm talking about white people, and I'm not. What I'm talking about when I use the term whiteness are the norms in our society that are predicated upon those things that have been set into place by white Americans. And so, if someone is embedded in whiteness, then yes, anything outside of that is going to seem abnormal, or you have not experienced, or something that you hear someone else's experience and you view it as abnormal, and thus can dismiss it because it is not within the realm of what's normal for you. And it makes it even easier to dismiss. And I'll share a quick story of what helped me to broaden my awareness on this. I was serving in the United States military, and I was in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And for the first time in life, I didn't feel like an other when I was there, because there were people there who were as dark as I was. And once I put on the traditional garb in Saudi Arabia, I blended like everybody else. I was normalized, right? But it wasn't until I went up into a stand to buy something, and around that stand was a little small window. And that window was where all of the women or females had to go to be served. They had to go around back. And my mind immediately went to colored water fountains and whites only water fountains. And it brought about a new awareness for me of not only the experiences that my parents may have had, but how others can choose to see or not see based on based on their experiences. Because I knew the story of my parents, I was able to see that. But someone who doesn't know that story because their parents didn't live it or didn't teach it, they're more apt to ignore that. And I think that's what has happened here in this country all too often, is that many of our white mothers and sisters have chosen to ignore because they either have not experienced or have not been taught. And that is, I think, to the detriment not only to those individuals, but to the country as a whole.
Now, I do run into some barriers where people are engaged in the struggle, quote unquote, um, in name only. And so those are some battles that we're fighting now as well. They only want to talk about it, or only want to put face on it. But when it comes to allocating resources and the sacrificing that is inherent, I believe, in the country that we live in, things come a bit slower. So, so I appreciate you sharing your journey to this point, and how that theme of sacrifice is inherent in doing this work. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's not like sacrifice for a moment, like, I mean, I'm exhausted, like I told you when we got on. I left the house at 7 a.m. I returned to the house at 7 p.m. And what did I do? I jumped right on here to have a 2 hour conversation about race,
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so, I mean, it's it's a choice. It's a choice. And
It
I
is.
was able to reflect and make a conscious decision and choice. And that's really all I want for every citizen of this country and every human in this world to be able to do. What are your values? What do you believe in? What are you willing to sacrifice? And then execute.
Then
Whatever the
act on
answer
it.
is,
Hmm.
then execute according to those true answers. So yeah, that's all I want. And I think it throws people off, right? Because like a lot of people, they expect you want to like transform them, right? Like you want to
Right.
manipulate and transform them into something else. And I'm
No,
like, listen, if you go down this path, you will manipulate and transform yourself, and that will be
yourself.
your choice. It will have nothing to do with me except for that I gave you an opportunity to make the choice, and that's it. That's all I want, and if that's a manipulation, like everything is, you know what I mean? Like, come on. So
That's interesting. And I think because of the fears that people have, fears predicated or based in misinformation and disinformation, like the Rufos of the world, the groups like the moms of the world. I think that is what causes people to be inhibited in making those choices to maintain the status quo, as opposed to learning even their own worldview as taught to them by their own families, which inherently involves, where did your values come from, your beliefs, your assumptions, your biases, and then deciding which of those things you want to maintain and teach to the next generation of people, knowing full well that if the status quo continues to maintain, you and I are going to continue to be here. so, so we all have choices, yeah. And people get it all twisted. Oh, you can't convince me by coming at me that way. Well, if I were trying to convince you, I'd agree with you. Yeah. Not here to convince you. I'm here to speak the truth. I'm here to speak facts, right? And we're at a point now in our country where people are full on rejecting even facts, and it's making the work more difficult. Although I'm sure those like yourself and myself, um, we won't be moved. No.
no, sir. We yeah, steadfast is a good word for for what I am at this point in time. And I don't think anyone can unravel that. To be honest, once you commit your life to something, truly, that's the end. So
Exactly.
yeah, so well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your story, for sharing with me, and for sharing with all of us, like all of that information. It's just, like I said earlier, it means so much, and I'm very grateful to be able to share this space with you, share this work with you, and just know that you're out there and that you care about the same things that I care about, that you value the same things I value, and that you're working towards the same goals that I'm working toward. It's so heartening in an environment where mostly things are raining down on me, to find someone who is a brother in arms. So I appreciate you giving me that
Oh no,
opportunity.
no. I totally appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat it up with you. And if I could be of any assistance in any within my capacity, please feel free to call on me. Yeah, absolutely.
Ditto, brother. And like honestly, I think that we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things
Yeah.
that there's a lot of things that I have to tell you. So yes, I mean this. I think this is the start of a great friendship, and I appreciate you greatly, and thanks for being on. And is there any last words that you want to give to the audience, or is there anything you want to plug?
Sure. The only last words that I would share would be to encourage people to find um, the thing within themselves to help bring this country toward what the original framers put onto paper, and that includes working on self first. You don't have to listen to anyone else on social media, even in your families, but do the self work that is needed, because the self work is where we as human beings can uh, connect with those things that connect us all. And that one thing is empathy. I can empathize with um, my Jewish brothers and sisters as well as my Palestinian brothers and sisters. I can empathize with women and their plight in this country. I can empathize with members of the LGBT community because I'm a human, not because I'm black or because I've had experiences, uh, negative experiences based on my race, but because I'm a human being. And so I would encourage people moving from conversations like this to talk about race and the construct as it currently manifests in this country, but also to focus on your humanness so that you can connect with those things that make us human. And that is ensuring that others are able to live the lives that they've been meant to live. And we do that by empathizing with them.
Thank you so much. That is a great note to end on, our shared humanity and activating our collective empathy. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time.